Very good. Thank you, everybody, for attending our tax-exempt review committee meeting for today. We have 4 items on the agenda. Number 1 is approved tax-exempt review committee meetings of 7/28/20. And if everybody's had a chance to look at it, otherwise we will accept a motion.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 2, a new industry application by AdShark Ventures LLC. Application for a 5-year exemption. Jim.
Yeah, I'll have the owner of AdShark Ventures come up here and tell us a little bit about the company. They're applying for the 5-year property tax exemption. Recently, though, the specific site that they had fell through, or they weren't no longer going to be able to acquire that. Nevertheless, I wanted the company to come talk about the business because in some ways, we're trying to create jobs here, and where exactly in Fargo they locate might not be that important. And so we're not looking for a final recommendation today, but more an indication of whether or not you feel this particular business is worthy of a property tax exemption for the job creation that they would have. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rick Berg with AdShark to talk about the business.
Well, thanks, James. I guess I can start off by just telling you a little bit about who we are, what we do. So we are a e-commerce and lead generation marketing agency. We essentially just help businesses grow, and we do that by driving sales and leads on various digital platforms. We've been around for 7 years. We have a team of 17 employees, and we actually just had our 7-year anniversary a couple of days ago. And yeah.
So if anybody has any questions, I guess I'll ask you, did you start in Fargo, or can you tell us a little bit about how the business started?
Yeah, we did start in Fargo in August of 2013. I was actually working for Miriam Mobile, which is now known as Bushel. I was their only salesperson at the time, and they were doing some digital marketing for themselves, and I noticed that they could improve it in multiple ways. So I just studied it for about 2 weeks straight and kind of revamped the whole thing, and it was successful right out of the gate. And after that, Jake, the CEO, kind of started telling other businesses about it, and they started reaching out to me. So I, as a side gig, just started helping out some of these companies and did some research about what other companies are just focused on digital and just driving sales and leads. And turns out there really weren't any other than a kid that was in NDSU at the time. So I reached out to him, and 3 days later we just merged up, and that was that.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. Jim, can you talk a little bit about the numbers on page 2? Obviously, once we know the land values and things like that, some of these will change, but can you summarize that for us?
Yeah, I think on what they're looking for is building estimated at, let's see, I got the wrong page here.
And I guess while you're looking that up, I guess on page 3 as well, and maybe you can talk a little bit about what this would do, this tax incentive, as far as the number of employees that you have now and the intentions of if we did this and what you would do going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as the land value, the lot that we're looking at, like Jim said, fell through, but we'll be looking for another lot in Fargo and continue on kind of with these plans. So as far as the land value, probably in the 800,000 range, and the building that would go on top of it would be about 10,000 square feet. Preliminary estimates, maybe about $2 million project, so 2.8 million total. And what it would do for us is, right now we're in a office space. We've been growing pretty fast every year. and things are just getting kind of tight. And I think if we were able to build our own building how we want it, our office, it'll help us recruit staff, continue to keep growing, and I think it'll help drive new business in Fargo for us as well.
And so if you don't mind me asking you, so if we give you this tax incentive, will it allow you to hire more employees or build a bigger building, or can you be a little more specific about that?
Yeah, the tax incentive would essentially allow us to go forward with the building project. Okay. And from there, the building itself, I think, will help us tremendously just grow, attract staff as well as new clients.
Okay, and then Jim, if you don't mind, and if anybody else has any questions, please interrupt me, but just the number of employees, the number that they have now and the number they project, can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, look at the number of employees. They're looking at adding, going from 15 employees up to 46, rather substantial growth. There'll probably just be 5 in the first year, and that's why when we looked at that scoring, they didn't get to 100 points, but if you look, a few years down the road, then they're over 100 points, and that's one of the things I think has really been unclear about the scoring system is, do we look at it, the first year, the second year, the third year? In talking to the EDC, kind of a business that's just getting started, you're getting more customers, your growth is going to be a little bit slow in the beginning, but then it'll increase as you get more employees. And as far as the questions regarding the building, 10,000 square foot Class A office space, they estimated the value at $2 million for the building. The property tax exemption each year would be at about $27,000 a year, so that does help a young business grow, but not having to pay that property tax for those first five years. They would pay on the land, and the land tax be about $14,000 a year, on assuming it's about $1 million in land, maybe a little less.
The other thing is the positions, the starting wage is $20 to $28. And so the other thing that kind of jumps out at me is, obviously that's a positive. We want to encourage higher wage jobs, I guess. And I don't know if the EDC has any comments they would like to add, but the other thing we've talked about, and this might come up later in the discussion, is the scoring of hourly wages. And some of these things we are going to possibly update, and that might be something that we'll talk about later on in the meeting. So. Any other comment? Kent?
I just wanted to comment on section 20. The net income projections are quite high, 350 to 800,000 by the end. So this one bothers me a bit in that the number of jobs is low according to our scoring sheet, and that the net income projections are, I believe, very high. And so I'm waffling about supporting this, unless we get into that discussion about changing the scoring on the number of jobs. And yet the jobs are still going to be low, and the net income is still going to be high. And so I think that's something we need to balance out as we talk about potentially changing our scoring methodology. Is this an upstart business that's just barely struggling to get started? Or is this a business on cruise control that's growing at a high rate of speed? And that's how I see this one. It's been very successful. Congratulations for that. But just wanted to air those feelings about that.
No, that's good. I think that's good. Any other comments or questions?
What are the disciplines of the jobs that are being added, or areas of focus?
It would be marketing, basically digital marketing positions, creative design positions, management positions, and then also website optimization positions.
Any other comments or questions? And I guess this would be kind of labeled this as informational, because they'll come back once you get a firmer number as far as the land price and the building price. Isn't that correct, Jim?
Yeah, well, really they just need a location, and we hope they'll stay in Fargo with their.
So if we don't need any action, if there aren't any other questions, we'll just continue this to our next meeting unless somebody has different wishes.
I think when Rick, whenever you get a new site, I want you to get back to me, and because we'll have to re-advertise for the public hearing at the City Commission, because that was advertised for a specific site.
So we'll welcome you back again, and like I said, we'll be familiar, and I do think there's some questions that we'll kind of have answers to at that time. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll move on if that's all right with everyone. Number 2 will be continued, and number 3 on our agenda is application for pilot for Beyond Shelter. Jim, can you get us started with that one?
Yeah, this is an application for a payment in lieu of taxes for a low-income housing project that would be built on the corner of 7th Street and 4th Avenue North in downtown Fargo. Approximately 40 some housing units. The city has already shown strong support for the application, providing most of the land that this would be built on. That land had been purchased over the years with both some local funds, but primarily block grant money that we received from HUD. I'll have Dan Madler get up and talk about the application, but we had also sent this to our financial advisors for review per our policy, and at the last page is their memo. When you're providing low-income housing through the low-income housing tax credit program, it caps the rents, and so if the full taxes had to be paid on this, there's no way they could pay the debt that's required for that. That's been true of almost every low-income housing project. This one's a little unique. If they don't receive this pilot approval, they can go to the state and get basically very similar pilot approval. The advantage of this, and I'll have Dan talk to it, is that it provides a little bit of local match that then improves their chances of getting the low-income housing tax credits from the state. Each year, I think there's about a dozen applications for the low-income housing tax credits, and they only have enough tax credits to fund 4 or 5 projects. And so it's extremely competitive. And so every little bit helps, every little bit gets you a few more points. But I'll have Dan come up and talk about the project and the importance of this pilot request. This will also go to Cass County and the schools.
Thank you, Jim, and Commissioner Pepcorn and members of the committee. Thank you for your time today in consideration of Beyond Shelter's pilot request for the Milton Earl. Just for the record, my name is Dan Madler. I'm the CEO of Beyond Shelter Incorporated. We're a Fargo-based nonprofit developer of affordable housing. And I'm here today with Lisa Rodvold, our development director. And we're both excited to be here today to talk about the Milton Earl and some of the things that it has to offer. Essentially, it's a downtown affordable housing project that will basically serve Fargo's flourishing downtown community. And both Lisa and myself are really excited about the opportunity and the partnership relationship with the city, as Jim talked about with the CDBG funds. One of the things I'd like to do before I turn it over to Lisa and talk a little bit more about the project is just talk a little bit about the project beneficiaries, who this project will serve, and who Beyond Shelter serves, by just bringing together some context. Basically, or put some color on what Beyond Shelter has done for the community in the past 20 years that we've been working here in Fargo. To date, we have developed 7 quality affordable senior housing projects here, senior homes here in Fargo. And this week, on Thursday, we're going to be closing on the financing of our 8th project, Homefield 3. It'll be basically located on 42nd Street, just south of the Red River Valley Zoo. And there'll be an additional 39 units, which will bring our total of senior units that would serve the community of Fargo to 325. Some demographic information about who the project beneficiaries are, our senior tenants. Average age, tenant age is 72. Average income is $17,500 a year. And if you kind of equate that to an hourly wage, that would be $8.41 an hour. Our tenants, on average, contribute 29% of their income for rent, which is an average rent of about $423 a month. That includes all utilities, generally a parking garage, and they just pay electrical costs. Basically, our average vacancy rate for our Fargo units is 2% or less and has been strong ever since. We've started developing affordable housing for the seniors, and we fully anticipate Homefield 3 to lease up in approximately 30 to 45 days. It'll go fast once that door opens. Just to kind of basically, before I turn it over to Lisa, talk a little bit about what Jim was saying about the pilot and our opportunities. The tax credit program is the vehicle we would use to bring private equity investment to the community of approximately over $7 million. And as Jim mentioned, it's a very competitive to secure an award of tax credits. And so what we like to do, and we always try to maximize the scoring points within an allocation plan that North Dakota Housing administers. And this component they look at is local contribution or community match. Does the community support the project? Not just orally or verbally, but also they're putting some money or investment into the project. And so by issuing the pilot, it's basically stepping up. It's showing that the community and the county and the school district, if all three entities agree that there's an investment, affordable housing is important to our community. So very competitive. And with the higher state pilot, that statutory that we also would qualify for, it would raise our rents. We're always looking to bring the affordable rents down to serve that extremely low income household earning $8 and some cents an hour, $17,000 a year. And that's how we're able to do that. And the pro forma that Lisa put together and that you see in your packets kind of basically lays that out. And so with that, I'll turn it on over to Lisa, provide a little color to the actual project, number of units, etc. And be happy to answer any questions now and/or we'll stand afterwards.
Well, while Lisa's coming up, can I just ask a real quick question? One is a favor, if we could have a map when you come to the city commission, just an overhead view, that would be awesome. Sure. But can you give us a summary? And maybe Jim can help a little bit. So some of these lots to assemble this land were city owned and how that all works. So if you could talk a little bit about that, I think we'd appreciate that, because and the other thing is it's walking distance to the downtown, which I think is a very good selling point. So thank you.
I think the acquisition of this property kind of happened gradually over almost 20 years. We happened to own a building for a social service agency on the corner of 4th Avenue and 7th Street. We later acquired the parking lot next door to help serve that building. A dilapidated house came up for sale. Adjacent to that, we bought that, and then another one came up for sale, and then there was one left where we had offered the owner the money to acquire that home, and instead Kilbourne Group happened to acquire that, and so over the last couple of years we agreed to essentially Beyond Shelter was allowed to buy that, and the city agreed to sell a lot over by the Nestor, almost a bit of a trade, and so. Because a lot of the lots were acquired with HUD funds, we sell the lots, we have to put money back into the HUD program, or if we use it for an eligible purpose, such as low-income housing, that's what the city had intended to do. So some of it trying to meet our goal of trying to bring more housing downtown, but also bring more affordable housing downtown, and this particular for seniors. And so that's why it was sort of a priority of our community development committee to try to transfer this to a developer who would do low-income housing. And so Beyond Shelter was the one that had ended up owning one of the pieces of property, and we transferred the rest, or the city transferred the rest to them. The Milton Earl, just as a side, I believe that's the name of the architect of the house that was on your agenda recently, is not in very good condition. So.
Well, and from a perspective of location, the biggest landmark right next to is the sanctuary. It's right across the street from the sanctuary, directly west. on that block that's currently, like Jim said, mostly vacant on that quarter location. So I think it'll be a great addition, and the architecture and some of the projects we were able to feature are pretty exciting. And Lisa will talk about that right now, and then we'll both stand for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Rotvold. I'm the Development Director for Beyond Shelter. And I wanted to give you a little bit deeper dive into what this project is all about. It's going to be a 42-unit apartment building. We'll have 36 one-bedroom apartments and 6 two-bedroom apartments. The ground level will be an indoor parking garage that will be accessed off 7th Street. And the main entrance to the door or to the building will be on 4th Avenue North. We will have a community room on the ground level as well for use by tenants. It also offers an opportunity to bring in some community activities, kind of keep them away from the apartments, but bring them into the building and allow for things like the Heart and Soul Community Cafe could, in theory, serve a meal there, and some other kinds of things just to engage with the downtown neighborhood. So because it's a low-income housing tax credit development, we are targeting households that earn 60% of AMI or less. That means for a single person, the highest income that they would be able to have is $37,560. And for a 2-person household, it would be $42,960. But as Dan mentioned, Beyond Shelter's portfolio and the way we put our deals together, we try to dive pretty deep and serve very low-income households. Just about 70% of the tenants that live in Beyond Shelter properties earn 30% of AMI or less. So, we are diving deep and really trying to meet that need, which continually is identified as the greatest need for affordable housing, is that 30% and below population. So our total development budget is around $11 million. We are currently putting applications together for funding. We'll be applying for tax credits and some other funds that are available for affordable housing. We hope to have all of our financing in place by the end of this year. The projections that you're looking at as far as development budget and pro forma are based on some assumptions. And so when we put in another funding application earlier this summer, we sell the tax credits to an investor. That brings equity so we can minimize debt. We priced credits at 88 cents on the dollar. And that's always a moving target. It's very much ebbs and flows with markets and the economy. We got an updated quote from one investor last week, and it was 85 cents. And so definitely shopping those credits around to get the best price, to get the highest investment, will be part of the process. So things are a little bit fluid, but we give, we take, we land where we need to land. The development costs are based on 2 projects that we have under construction currently over in West Fargo, right on Cheyenne Street, the Monterey and Brighton Place. So we feel pretty good about construction cost projections just based on the most recent bids that we got on that project. Of course, right now, lumber is kind of a wild card, so nobody has control over that. But so yeah, that's the development expenses, and then rents. At this point, we have been able to secure about 15 units of rental assistance. So for the households that earn 30% of AMI or less, or for the units that are designated to that income, there will be a project-based rental assistance associated with those units. those tenants will pay only 30% of their monthly income. On the rent sheet, you'll see that those numbers are higher. It's a HUD assistance program, and they have us do a rent comparability study, which we're waiting any day now to get. But those rents are likely to be higher, but to be clear, the tenants will not be paying that. They will only be paying 30% of their monthly income. And at this point, one bedroom rents are looking at about $668. Two bedrooms are ranging from $475 up to $827, depending on the income targets. Generally speaking, we would like to be able to push those a little bit lower. And we will do, all that we can to try and push those lower, just so we can make it more affordable for our tenants. I think that's kind of a basic overview. Are there questions?
One thing I should, just if you want to see the exact pilot payment schedule, if you look at page 20 of your packet, should note first this property really hasn't been paying any property taxes because had been owned by the city for many years, and so everything that's paid is an increase over that. But it would start off at about 3,000 and climb to about 16,000. If they go through the state program, the difference is about $6,000 a year. So difference between what they can get from the state and what they're asking from the city and the county is $6,000 a year. But every little bit helps with these projects, and also it's very important for that scoring. One of the advantages for the city, of course, is it's an infill site. We don't have to add any city services. It's kind of a challenge for them because it's hard to stage in your construction downtown, and they do have a house on the site they have to demolish, as well as kind of a deteriorated parking lot. So there's a little bit of site cleanup, not a lot, but some.
In the current mix of downtown, how many other units would be similar to this that exist now for this population?
I would say probably the 400 would be similar. Of course, that's an older building. This will be a lot more modern and updated. A lot of technology in this building. And whether or not the 400 remains as affordable housing is, we'll see.
So there would,
But it's been there a long time, and oftentimes, private investors or private developers will, run it through the affordability period that they're required to deliver under the terms of the funding program. And once they reach the end of that, they have the option to either remain affordable or opt out and go to market. So I would say that. Dan, can you think of others? That probably would be the closest one I can think of.
so when looking for demand of the project, there are a limited number of opportunities for this population to remain in downtown. If
Right.
they, from the number of people that want to be there.
Right. And anecdotally, because we have other senior properties, we have moved in individuals who have been had to leave downtown and have moved into some of our other developments. And when they heard that we were pursuing this, they were super eager to have an opportunity to come back downtown, because people just like that lively, it's lively, it's walkable. It's just nice things happening downtown.
Any other comments or questions? I would say that that's, from the city commission's perspective, we want to have more low-income housing. Our concern is that it's a good thing, we're having more housing downtown, but a lot of it is not affordable. And I do think this is kind of one of our areas of focus. So I do know some of the other commissioners are supportive of as well. And so I think it's a great project. The pilot, can you explain to us how that runs, Jim, and how at a certain point then that expires as well, correct?
It'll be over a 20-year period. That's the longest that the city can grant a pilot, and so the pilot is not granted on the land. So the land tax will vary based on what land values are downtown and whatever the mill levy happens to be. They've estimated that start at about 3,000, gradually grow to 4,500. The pilot payment requested is very low in the first 3 years as they kind of get established and get some of their other costs taken care of. then it would go to about 11,000 a year and gradually increase up to 16. You can see for the full taxes, if they don't get the exemption and they weren't to get a pilot, that would be over 140,000 a year, which would not be affordable at all for just the property tax would probably take all of the rent money just to pay those. And then the state pilot, would start a little bit stronger early and then run up to about 24,000. After 20 years, Dan, maybe explain what happens then. Then they could be subject to the full taxes, or does the state one continue? I don't recall that.
So our anticipation is basically once this pilot burns off, then we would convert the project over to the state pilot. Essentially, the reason we're preferencing the pilot that we're requesting is to keep our rents low, lower them a little bit, and also have that competitive advantage. We're bringing everything to the table for our application. Without those points, it will not score and it will not be awarded. And so it's strategically taking a look at how can we maximize or lower our rents to the maximum amount possible, have a financially feasible project, and still have an end game. At the end game, we would convert it to the state pilot. Can continue to basically pay a pilot to support local fire, police, what we can contribute, but at the same time keep that project here in downtown, this new asset that's going to be a community asset for the next 40, 50, 60 years, truly affordable to the senior population, which when Lisa talked about the 400, it's senior disabled. I don't think there is a fully 62 and older just senior designated in downtown. And so this would bring that community and that aspect to the downtown area, where on the opposite side with the high rise and things, people are moving out because of relocation. And so this will help bring some of that back. And I also can appreciate color and visuals. And so last Thursday we had a neighborhood meeting. That's one of the best practices that we do, is try to get input from the neighborhood. And we had 4 neighbors show up, and they all spoke favorably of the project and were excited. But at the same time, we also handed out a brochure that has a little color of what the architectural renderings look like and stuff. And I only have 1 copy, but if you wanted a little flavor and you're okay in the COVID world, I could hand it around.
Yeah, if you want to bring it over here, we can put it up on the screen.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim.
Any other comments or questions while Dan's doing that? But I would request that we have a map and some pictures, especially for commissioners, especially myself. I'm not that bright, so I like shiny things that are that catch my attention. If you don't mind, I'd appreciate it. Ken.
So I had a curiosity question, because I don't know that I've seen the North Dakota State Pilot listed anywhere, at least in my short term on this committee. Is this an either-or decision? It's either the city contribution with the pilot or the state. And so my question is, can it be all of the above? Or is it prohibited in the state law?
It's either one or the other. It's I think there's a section in the state law that gives the Housing Finance Agency the ability to, set the property taxes at a certain percentage of the rents. That's only for nonprofit housing organizations. When the Housing Authority partnered with a for-profit, then they were not eligible for that state option, and they used the city option. So my thinking is there any strategic opportunity to consider legislation that allows you to merge the two together to bring those rents down even farther? I know it probably would take legislative lobbying, but if we have such a strong demand for low-income housing in our city, and there's a siloed state assistance program laying out there, it would at least be worth our time to consider proposing that, wouldn't it? I know we've talked, I think the Housing Authority had talked about, trying to expand that program and try to improve it. The danger was that when you open that door to the legislators in times of a tight budget, you might lose what you already have. That was the concern. I think there's a concern that the western part of the state maybe doesn't share our concern about affordable housing.
Well, and just looking at the numbers, the North Dakota State Pilot Program seems to be way less than our local contribution. So I mean, the way I'm looking at it, it's 16,000 contribution against 146,000 in taxes, so I mean, wouldn't,
No, the North Dakota State would be the far right. So if they apply to the state, they'll pay 16,000. If what you approve, it's the first year is 3,000. So that's the difference.
yeah, but they still have to pay full land taxes under the state.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's
No,
cash flow negative to them, isn't it?
I think under the state, they're paying, are you still paying on the land, Dan? I don't recall.
It's
No.
a combined, it's a combined total. And so essentially the pilot is just a tool on how you can get affordable rents. Basically, you're buying down your operating costs and a number of different things on the financing end. Legislative change really wouldn't drive, the tool is there. The main driver that we need to develop affordable housing is the tax credit program itself. That resource, without that program or those resources, no affordable housing can get built. Essentially, it's all about financing. Essentially, on a conventional financing of a home, you're probably putting 20% down in equity cash and borrowing 80%. The way you do affordable housing, like Lisa said, this project's the total development cost is north of 11 million. By having the tax credit as the main tool, we're able to flip that equation upside down, and essentially we're bringing equity or cash down at 80 to 85% and borrowing 15%. So that's how we're able to basically cover our operating costs with lower rents. But without the pilot, and this specific pilot that we're requesting today, we wouldn't be competitive. The city of Fargo's application, our application for the Milton Earl, would not be competitive across other communities that are applying for the same affordable housing project. Our funding source, the tax credit program. And so that's the driver. And basically, by getting the pilot under the traditional that we're asking for today, it'll allow us to maximize our points for that category. In addition, we're doing other things, supportive services, bringing community supports to the project, Meals on Wheels, and other synergies to allow households to age in place, and other project amenities to really make this a quality asset to the community. But it all starts with getting an allocation or an award of those funds, and it all talks about going back to strategic conversation of this is strategically how we can maximize this portion of our application and hopefully be successful in bringing the Milton Earl to the community of Fargo and the county of Cass.
I should know too, where you see the requested pilot, they could actually request that be 0 for 20 years, but they haven't. They're trying to, provide some money to local governments for the services. The Housing Authority one was approved recently, and that did have a 0 on the pilot and only paid the land because they couldn't even afford to pay a minimal pilot payment. And so there's an opportunity to try to drive the rents down a little bit more, but in order to do so, you'd have to take that to 0, and that wouldn't drive them down that much.
Yeah, and the point of my comment was just simply to challenge the status quo at the state level, because we often have to do that in our city lobbying efforts, and you see something that you think maybe you can build a better mousetrap and drive those rents down even farther. So that's why I was asking.
Okay.
I can add that one more benefit of the city's participation in the pilot as requested is that we have asked for 0 in the first 3 years. And because, development budgets are a little bit fluid, and we are subject to, we don't know what kind of pricing we're going to get on our tax credits. At this point, we anticipate we will be deferring developer fee, which basically turns into a soft loan that gets paid from cash flow. But under the terms of the tax credit program, that deferred developer fee has to be paid off within the first 10 years of operation. And so, that little bit of margin that's less than what we would be paying under the state pilot helps us to get that paid off within the window that we need to, and the 0 in the first 3 years.
Any other comments or questions? The other thing I would encourage people is if you get a chance to drive by that corner right now, I'd I think you should do that, and then look at this picture of this building. That would be a great improvement. That would be a great asset for a long time. And on top of that, not only would it look a lot better, it's gonna serve people that's who we wanna have coming downtown. So, any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we'll accept a motion.
Propose a motion to approve as directed, 20-year pilot.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Congratulations. That's, for the commission meeting, if you wouldn't add some of those things, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you for thinking about our elderly.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, and the last item on our agenda is the tax-exempt pilot scoring system discussion. And I will add, this is my editorial comment. So we tried, Kent was on the committee. It was a long-serving committee, and I'm sure it's been going on a long time. But our main objective was we wanted to have it be more of an objective scoring system. It is by far from scientifically expert, but we had a lot of good people with good hearts working on it. But what we were trying to do is similar to the Renaissance scoring, to have a scoring system. It's far from perfect, and we did not file any type of copyright, so we're willing to have it amended. And I think that's what we're discussing now, because it was done a few years ago, and you want to make sure that we're updating things. So, all right, that's the end of my editorial comments.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
I visited with the EDC staff about, what kinds of businesses are we trying to get, and what are really the important factors to consider when we're providing tax exemptions. And so we talked about two things. One was, do we start to add some additional points for things that are important and are not adequately captured in our current scoring system? Or do we go to a scoring system that's more like what we have for tax increment financing, where there's a dozen goals and you need to meet 8 of them? And so do you go to more of the kind of a menu or a listing, and you need to check so many boxes in order to qualify? And so I'd like to get your thoughts on that, whether we kind of stay with a numerical score or go with something that's still more numerical. As far as if we stay with something numerical, I put up just some ideas here. One is that we look at the jobs not just in the first year, and that was just been a local interpretation, but really look at job creation in the next 2 to 5 years. We look at the wages, but we don't score employee benefits. And so some employers have benefit packages that might include family health insurance or pension, and others wouldn't. So trying to factor that into the scoring system would be important. The other is EDC has targeted certain industries, and certain industries have a more potential for growth. And so if you're in one of those, maybe you get more points. And another factor would be, if you're manufacturing something and you're buying your steel from a local steel manufacturer, that's going to have some clear secondary employment other than that, so maybe get some more points for that. So yeah, I'd like to have Joe come up though and talk a little bit about his thoughts on what's important and what he thinks would be probably most advantageous for businesses that are looking at maybe not only our community but other communities, and so they know what's predictable, and as far as when you're recruiting businesses, what you're looking for. Joe.
Thanks for having me today to continue this discussion. And I think that's probably the most important thing is, as you said, Commissioner Pepcorn, this is pretty organic, and we want to stay on top of kind of the changing issues that cities face and that the business community faces when looking at making investments. From my perspective, there's probably really 2 main points to start from, and one is, again, I'm just speaking for myself here, when these discussions happen, a lot of times it's viewed in financial terms. So if you were a bank and you're looking at the investment that the company's making, what do you want to put in to get not only your principal but your interest back on that investment? And then the second is looking at the competitive nature of a project. Obviously, our organization deals with primary sector companies. In many ways, they can locate in a lot of other markets. And so what are we seeing other markets doing? What are we hearing from national site consultants who are hired to be the representatives in looking at other markets to make those determinations? I've seen communities that I will just define as very bureaucratic in their processes, and sometimes those are challenging. And I've seen where it's kind of a free-for-all, and that can be challenging as well. I think the numeric scoring system that has been used and that Jim brought up in the discussion that we had at the last meeting, I think we all would agree, looking at that and tweaking it could definitely be an option that the committee chooses to use. Or there could be one like the TIF goal setting, as Jim mentioned. If there's 10 criteria and a company meets X number, maybe that is enough weighting for you to make a determination on taking something to the full commission. The other option could be a hybrid, where there is a numerical scoring provided, but there are also certain check boxes that serve as maybe tipping points in your discussions. And so when the EDC team met with Jim, we were talking about all of those items, and obviously you're the ones who need to make those determinations and give us some direction on kind of next steps. From my seat at the table, I think we could work in any one of those environments to inform you on why a project should receive assistance. And it's not obviously just to this taxing body, but it goes to the county as well, and the school districts if they choose to weigh in. So I don't think we have any answers specific to you today, but at least some thoughts that could get your feedback on what other steps you think we should be taking in this discussion.
Joe, can I ask you a question? So actually what popped into my mind is, so like when planning does something, there's some boxes that it's like the criteria is satisfied. I don't know if that makes sense. Like to still keep using this, but there's some things where you can just say, instead of having it have a numerical value, say, was this, I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, today we have a plethora of data available to us, and it's more timely. For example, we have the ability to share with our clients, with anybody, occupational data by wages for that occupation in this MSA. And if there are projects brought forward, you could say, yeah, we like this industry, that box is checked, and we like the wages for the occupation for that industry versus just a average wage for the market, right? We could go that route and check that box. Most markets I've worked, the healthcare industry is pretty supportive of companies getting assistance wanting benefits, especially health insurance benefits. And those are things that could be part of a checkbox, right? Are you, is the employer paying 50% of a single or 100 or 75% of a family? Whatever that target needs to be. I mean, we can continue to work with the local SHRM group and others to get more kind of a data-driven decision. I would caution against black and white decisions. It's either on or off because there's always factors that mix into these, but give you a little bit more guidance as you're looking at some of these projects. That might take it away from the hard numeric score, and sometimes that's good and sometimes that's challenging, especially for the elected officials when then you're surrounded by constituents who will ask why you did or didn't support a certain project.
I like the hybrid approach as long as someone can follow it and understand it.
Right.
Because if it's clear as kind is the best method forward, so everyone can kind of understand what's going on. I would like more tie-in from however the hybrid, whatever model is decided. If there are points that are a checkbox, like did you do this, that somehow they tie back into the greater picture of what the city is trying to accomplish. That it's not just a tax exemption committee and the approval in that box. Because I get a lot of questions from like, why did you make that decision, or why did you do this, and what does the city as a whole think of that? And that piece, that thread, that continuous thread of why things are done and how is missing. Because then once you explain it and talk about why it's important, they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But if there are boxes we're trying to check, like what does it support? Does it support the long-term strategic plan of the city? Does it support a certain initiative of a group or that we feel is important? There isn't that tie-in right now for people to understand it, of why some of these decisions are made. But I also don't want to get too black and white either, because that has hurt us in the past, specifically in a policy or in an avenue. The gray is very confusing and trying to explain it. But I think there's a good way to find a good mix of that.
Yeah.
That's not too complex where people can actually follow it.
Yeah, I think a lot of psychology will show, don't give me 2 choices, but don't give me 22.
Mr. Chairman, and Joe, to your point, it's too late, but I would rather have named the Tax-Exempt Review Committee to the Business Assistance Committee. And it's a marketing standpoint. Commissioner, when I sat in your chair, it really is comforting to have a numeric system. On the private sector side, boy, those just look like huge walls to be overcome. And I think what we need to be continually reminding people when they're asking, why'd you do this? To me, it's simple. We're partnering with growth stage businesses in our community. As entrepreneurial as our community is, our form of government, our elected officials, our resources are all entrepreneurial oriented, and we're here to work with that. And sure, the toughest question I was ever asked is, instead of tax exemption, why don't we just eliminate taxes? Well, that'd work too. I'm not sure we're ready to do that, but each of these indicators, I can give you examples of companies that would have failed to meet any check box in here at some point, but have turned into huge dynamic companies. Hardware stores in small towns that turn into national retailers. I mean, you can just see these examples one after another. And what I would encourage as part of this is to say, this process of economic development is long-term in nature. We live in an ag state where you put a seed in the ground and 90 days later you can have it in a truck off to the elevator to get paid. We're planting forests. We're planting, oak trees that take years and years to develop. If we're so good at this that we can boil it down to a checklist on the winners, let's keep it secret because we can make a lot of money with that. We really want to keep that proprietary, so let's not talk about it here. I would encourage to continue to look at these, but even in the application today, when I saw those net incomes, Kent and Rick, I don't know if Rick's still here, but those dollars are not going to just be sitting there as net income. They're going to be reinvested into growth-sized businesses or diversification or different expansion of those businesses. But that's just my soapbox, economic development and economic incentives.
If I could say, I mean, the name of the committee, when you started that out, I was thinking about that actually. And I think the successful communities and markets, they have a culture, they have a way of doing business. It's a little bit of go to know, and it's more of kind of a business guidance. Like we're part of your team here as a community, and we want you to be successful. And we realize that you're not all going to be, but what's our portfolio look like? And that's really the strategy that the city has. And I think the comments about aligning with where the strategy is hugely important. That requires maybe more continuous work on everybody's part. But I think when the decision making comes, it aligns people a lot better. And just like our growth initiative fund, we have some losers, but we have a lot more winners. And it sometimes it's always good to to bet on something that doesn't work. Have a celebratory funeral. What did we learn? And then make the necessary changes for the way forward. But it's always going, and not trying to come up with the perfect solution to this and then realize you're never going to get there.
Maybe I can just continue to keep working with Joe on some different scoring options and then bring those back in a month. We will have a meeting next month. Good news is Aldeveron is looking at another expansion. You approved an exemption for them 2 years ago, and I forget how many jobs they said they were going to create, but they did a repeat of before. They've created all the five years of jobs within 2 years, so they're looking at an additional expansion. So that'll be on your agenda in a month.
Thank you very much. And I do think the main thing is this is great discussion, and I appreciate the EDC being here because I think that's very symbolic, and I think it's an ongoing back and forth. I think even though we're asking you to come to our meeting, I hope you feel that it's a two-way street, and I really appreciate you being here because I think you can add a lot, and we can learn from the things that you're focusing on to make sure that we are all going in the same direction. So I think that's very symbolic and very important. So thank you, Joe.
You know, thank you. And I'd be happy to ask you to come to more of my meetings if you're looking for something to do. So.
I appreciate that offer.
I had one comment, but I don't.
Jessica.
I don't expect an answer because it's probably to think through. But when it said jobs created in 2 to 5 years, in my world, for what I do, 5 years, who knows what that's going to look like?
Yeah.
I don't know what type of jobs. I have an idea, but the likelihood of it actually happening isn't always realistic. So if there's any data behind being able to say, you know, the majority of what we look at, maybe 3 is a better indicator of what will actually happen. 3 to 5 is, you know, a dream we're hoping to accomplish. So if looking at scoring, would it be more realistic to do 1 to 3 with an idea of 3 to 5 as a score instead of having that be the number that would drive some of that?
If you might have been listening in on our discussion before the start. I'm, you know, our plan's a 3-year plan as an EDC. I'm a big believer in the 3 years today. Maybe 15, 20 years ago, we could have gone 5, but I agree. It's probably not as realistic because the companies themselves, it challenges them. 1 year, they may still be figuring out where the front door is of their new facility, right? And so that, for me, that time frame of 3 years is actually aligns well with even how the EDC operates when we think about our goals as an organization for the region. You know, just because that's ours doesn't have to mean it's yours, but I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's a good time frame.
And when the 1 year is 2020, then even that might be a little bit of a stretch to predict what's going to happen, correct?
Exactly.
We're just going to remove this year.
Yeah. Thank
Any
you.
other comments? That was great. Lots of good conversation. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's a very productive meeting. I hope everybody enjoys participating. And it's 1:58, and we will adjourn. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.